Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Sharon Bown, and joining us this evening from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Garth Bateau. We warmly welcome the family of Private William Forbes Schuberth, whose story will be told shortly. We also welcome members of the 2nd 30th Battalion Association who are joining us this evening. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths and floral tributes will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family, visitors, and by students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, Good Shepherd Primary School, Plumpton, and from Victoria, Eleanora State High School, Eleanora. Please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Boys and girls, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where friends and families could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians to understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private William Forbes Schuberth. William Schuberth was born on the 27th of September 1906 in Sunderland, England, the son of Thomas and Emily Schuberth. When William was still young, his family moved to Australia and he came to live in Ballina, where he married Mary Fisher in 1928. The couple went on to have 3 children, Raymond, Shirley and Nola. In 1933, Schuberth was charged with driving without a licence after a lorry accident near Swansea left 5 members of the Schuberth family in hospital. He served for 4 years with the 15th Light Horse Unit of the militia and had been working as a labourer around Ballina and Newcastle, but he was unemployed when he enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 23rd of April 1941 in Paddington. Schuberth joined the 2nd 30th Battalion in Bathurst. After being fined £2 for being absent without leave during mid-July, at the end of the month the battalion sailed to Singapore and from there went to Malaya. On the 7th of December, Japanese forces landed in Malaya. B Company of the 2nd 30th ambushed the Japanese at Jemenche Bridge on the 14th of January 1942, while the rest of the battalion engaged the Japanese the next day. Following this, the 2nd 30th fought at Aya Hitam in Johor and then in the defence of Singapore Island. However, they could not stop the onwards drive of Japanese forces, and on the 15th of February, the British commander on Singapore surrendered. Schuberth and the rest of his battalion became prisoners of war at Changi Prison. Workforces were soon assembled with volunteers, promised better food and conditions, the first of which was A Force, which left Singapore in mid-May in a suffocating and immensely crowded health ship. A Force was split into 3, and Schuberth was among a group of 1,000 sent to Mergu in the remote south of Burma. At first, the conditions were adequate, if basic. Japanese control was fairly lax, and the Australian commander, Brigadier Arthur Varley, established a relatively good working relationship with the Japanese. Despite this, the prisoners who attempted to escape were executed without trial, despite the protest of Australian officers. On the 30th of July 1942, William Schuberth was executed for attempting to escape from Mergu. 18 years later, Leslie Hall, who had served as a sergeant in the 2nd 30th, submitted his account of what happened to William Schuberth to a short story competition run by the Sunday Telegraph. One fateful night, Bill Schuberth decided to go under the fence, slither into the jungle and try to make his way to the nearby village and try to get not only a little food for himself, but more importantly, to bring back food for those in hospital and too ill to go out to work. Unfortunately, Bill, a large man, whose one distinctive feature was a very hairy chest, was caught by the Burmese police, beaten and kicked before being thrown into a bamboo jail. He was able to kick his way out of the flimsy jail and made his way back to camp, where his best friends cleaned the blood from his face and tended as best they could his bruised body, and advised him to return to his bunk and pretend to be asleep. Returning to their ruined jail, the Burmese police lost no time in travelling to the camp, informing the Japanese commander that one of their prisoners had escaped, and were able to provide the information that the man had a very hairy chest. Only Bill and one other man in the camp matched the description, and the guards descended on one of the huts and started yelling and bashing one of the occupants. On learning what was happening, Bill immediately entered the other hut and gave himself up to the guards. Another good beating followed for Bill before he was taken before the camp commander, who called several of the Australian officers before him and wanted to know why one of their men had tried to escape. Knowing the penalty, the officers insisted Bill had not tried to escape. It was only desperate hunger that drove Bill to try to find some extra food for himself and others. The commander was not totally convinced, but agreed to contact his commanding officer with the problem. Some days later, the reply came back: execute immediately. The first indication Australian officers had that the reply had been received was when Bill was thrown into a truck, heavily bound and under heavy guard, driven to an undisclosed area. As they passed a group of Australians working around the campgrounds, Bill yelled out his final words: Tell the Colonel they are going to execute me. God bless you. Schuberth was buried at Tokian War Cemetery. He was 35 years old. On the 7th of March 2012, Schuberth and 19 other Australian prisoners of war who had been executed for trying to escape were awarded commendations for gallantry by the Commonwealth Government. William Schuberth's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private William Forbes Schuberth, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we to the left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you all for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.